Hey, Daddy.
Is everything okay?
Yes?
I mean, what's going on over there? Only a Q2 journal? That's not published in a high-impact journal. It's your first paper, but you didn't spend 5 years for Q2.
How can they give you the scientific method for research, but nothing for publishing? We're changing that. In this second foundational issue, we confront the next layer of challenges, even more frustrating as they are personal. The pressure that comes from being a KC and how it is amplified by the rise of impact and metrics. And we face the biggest challenges that make publishing so hard. This isn't about scare tactics. It's about preparation. We can't avoid our challenges. We're going to confront them, name them, break them down, and then use the knowledge we gain to build up our action plan for publishing. Because, as our ancestors knew and told us in their myths, the dragons you face are the ones guarding the gold. Nine years ago, I started working with you researchers. I actually call you KCs because that's what you are when you publish, knowledge creators. And from the beginning, I was able to see firsthand the multiple challenges and frustrations with what they call publishing. Ever since, I've been going deep and trying to demystify and systematize the process with a step-by-step, repeatable publishing action plan that guides you KCs through the publishing process and optimizes your impact. I'm Data Art, and let's see if we together can transform this phrase by changing that nasty P word to the F word. No, not that F word. Flourish. I want you KCs to publish and flourish. So in part one, we started breaking down the challenges of communication in science into the sub-challenges of reason persuasion of experts through the written word. And we will continue to break them down to help build up the communication aspect of our action plan for publishing. But this issue faces the other aspect of our action plan that brings secondary, emotional, and systemic challenges, all while you KCs are trying to achieve the high standards of science. This is a multifaceted pressure, but we will first need to realize why it exists. If a poorly written, scientifically unjustified manuscript gets published, science will suffer. This is the first facet of that pressure, but it derives from doing something consequential. On top of that, every detail of knowledge creation must be shared accurately, exposed, so your fellow KCs can properly build and connect new knowledge on top of it. So this side of the pressure should inspire you as it's balanced by the incredible collaborative community building of the knowledge of the universe that is science. But on the other side, this exposure of every detail brings the secondary challenges that your work is not only on display for any scientist to build on, but for anyone to judge. The line between your work as a KC and who you are as a KC starts to blur. This is another part of being a KC that is not properly framed in the wider world. I'm originally from the business world, 30 years from startups to multinationals. And while the members of a company are trying to meet high standards and accomplish goals, most of us were on display only to our boss, maybe our boss's boss. We could keep our work and who we were separate. Not so for you KCs. With a couple clicks, your advisors, deans, peers, parents, me, can see how you compare to the high standards. And they can go further. Compare you to other KCs, misinterpret what they find, or even worse. That's not an inspiring, but a frustrating pressure. Ugly dragons in front of you. And as usual, there's more. Last issue, I mentioned what I call the Why Revolution, when paleo KCs in India, China, Iran, and Greece elevated the persuasion method of logos, reason. At times, they say that this time period was the dawn of science because no discussion would be stopped because a god, guru, authority figure, they say, but be resolved or continued through reason. But to properly reason, for things to make sense, you need a couple ingredients, with the fundamental and absolutely necessary one being evidence. But at the high standards of science, a lot of evidence. But wait, there's more. Ingredients. as all that evidence needs to justify and coherently justify your reasoning, so it all holds together. Have you ever asked yourself, does my reasoning contain all the arguments I need to make? Do I have enough evidence that clearly justifies my reasoning? And is it coherent? If you don't ask those questions constantly, you're probably not a KC, or you don't work with them. The thing is, there's a big problem with reason. This problem with reason is a classic example of why you will often hear me speaking of the yin and the yang, this incredible universal concept that we have to try and find balance between two integrated but opposing forces. In reason, you could stall and destroy discussion by continually asking why, continuing to ask for evidence or justification of every major or minor point. Now imagine if you had to provide evidence that water is made up of 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen atom, or justify that it turns solid at 0 and vaporizes at 100 degrees every time you use water in a study. Science would never progress. So our wily ancestors found a solution to this problem, what is known as infinite regress in reasoning, the yang of reasoning. Or is it the yin? They would allow the appeal to authority. They would permit, they say, but with one crucial distinction. That could be confirmed that the authority was previously established by reason. This is the citation. And if allowing science to progress and not get slowed down in constant justification wasn't enough, it's even more powerful. The citation elegantly allows each study to be part of the continuous, eternal, reasoned discussion about a topic, specialty, field, discipline, and ultimately the universe we live in, that is the literature. This is a staggering, deep, heavy, communal, time-traveling concept, another one that is not properly framed nor adequately celebrated as the tremendous human achievement that it is. But, and it's a big but, human beings can mess anything up. Now, humans don't start out trying to mess things up. In fact, we're often trying to do a good thing. In the late 50s and early 60s, a publishing house, when I finally tell you the whole story, I don't know what you will do, but it's a doozy of a story. But this publishing house started the infamous publisher ways that we know today. So a greasy businessman came up with an amazing business idea, just one not necessarily amazing for science. He started introducing more and more focused journals, paid focused journals. And within a few years, university budgets were decimated from skyrocketing journal subscription costs for all these new journals. Sound familiar? And here's where things get messy. Because the universities, looking to stop bleeding money to this and similar publishers, asked the question, can we evaluate, quantify which journals we should subscribe to or not? And the genie of impact was out of the lamp. Now, this genie myth shows that humans creating messes from great ideas, unintended consequences, is an ancient concept, and in fact, a human extension of the yin and the yang. In English, we have a phrase, the road to ruin is paved with good intentions. So with the beauty of the citation, the road to the tyrannical metrics, starting with impact, directed first at journals, is paved with the good intentions of controlling greasy publishing houses. What could go wrong? Well, UKCs feel what went and is going wrong. I'm here today because when I started working with UKCs 9 years ago, I was kind of feeling what you felt because I was at times failing at publishing. Luckily, it wasn't my job because I was hired to translate or revise the English of manuscripts. But no matter how well I translated or revised them, some would get rejected. So one day, a fateful day for me, I was in a research director's office reviewing the last batch of submitted studies. And he stopped on one that he was sure was going to be accepted, but was rejected. And he took off his glasses, put his head in his hands and said, why are some studies rejected and others accepted? And in that question, I saw something I had learned previously in the business world. And from this book, The Effective Executive. The research director's question speaks to a fundamental concept of achieving any goal. I was helping the authors be efficient, what is known as doing things right, and focuses on how things are done. But being efficient doesn't matter if you are not first being effective, what is known as doing the right things, and focuses on what things you do. So for UKC, the clearest analogy of the effective efficiency distinction is that it doesn't matter if you conduct your experimentation perfectly, doing the methods right, being efficient, if it is based on a flawed experimental design, not doing the right methods, not being effective. This is the essence of what the research director was asking and why the manuscript is much more important than many KCs and others think. I have helped KCs publish studies that have been previously rejected, and I have helped KCs overcome peer review suggested rejections, not because I improved the English and composition, the how they were communicated, but because the authors made the manuscript more effective, adjusted the manuscript to adjust the what I call the essential elements of a manuscript. And this gets to the first major challenge.
Anyone?
Discussed last issue, it's not so strange that you KCs don't receive much education to effectively communicate. But here's your first major challenge. Why is there no Publishing 101, let alone 201, 245, Publishing Lab 310, responding to comments, and maybe even Publishing 401, I can't believe I'm saying this, publish in high-impact journals? Where is the curriculum or just some classes where they tell you the essential elements a manuscript needs in order to be published, where you learn to be effective in sharing created knowledge? Well, first, we're missing a step, and it gets down to how we learn. Generally speaking, there are two learning methods, with the first commonly known as learning by doing, the intuitive method. Or you learn by being shown the models, the conceptual method. For example, you learn your native language intuitively, listening and watching the experienced speakers around you. You try and do the language, you make mistakes, and those experienced speakers correct you. This is learning that gives you what we call experience. For your second language, you normally learn it conceptually by being taught verb tenses and their conjugations, noun phrases, prepositions. You learn these sub-models of the overall model of language, and in English, we call grammar. This learning gives you what we call education. But the missing step is that education needs the conceptual models to be built first. And this is the second major challenge that pretty much encompasses the first. There's very little conceptualization of being effective in a manuscript, what you need to do. Now, I have to talk about this because it directly fuels these secondary challenges you face, the pressure, not from high standards of science, but from the P word, impact, and the metrics that put UKCs on display. It's the definition of tyranny. It's arbitrary and unreasonable to put so much pressure on UKCs to publish without education or even conceptualization. Now, I also want to be clear that no education doesn't mean you don't know what's going on. Education enhances what you have already learned intuitively from doing publishing. You're all KCs, you know how to figure things out. The problem is, if you are outside of a top 200 research department, almost all of your learning is on your own. Intuitive learning is probably the best way to learn. It just takes a long time, especially in publishing. Conceptualization is much, much faster. There are many paths to conceptualize a deep and heavy subject. I started with the challenges, the dragons of communication, as there has been a ton of intuitive and conceptual knowledge generated over the last 2,000 years to face those dragons and get gold. Fighting the frustrating pressures and stress dragons of being on display and metrics we'll get into next issue. But we need to start facing this major dragon of conceptualization. Find an overall big essential element that a manuscript needs to communicate. So let's do that. Start conceptualizing, sharing created knowledge. And where to start? I don't know. A big goal, not just publishing, but being cited. And so we'll put that goal here in our conceptualization, and use it to derive a system behind the achievement of any goal, a feedback loop. Most components of life and activities can be broken down or up into feedback loops, models of systems where inputs are processed and create distinct outputs that feed back and become inputs in the same system. This phrase is a form of a negative feedback loop, where an input, not publishing, negatively affects the system and generates the P word. It's also known as a vicious cycle that luckily has its yang. Or is it its yin? It's called the virtuous cycle, a feedback loop where each repetition positively affects the system and produces the virtuous F word, flourish. So we've got the citation, but how do you get the first and subsequent cites? I felt for a while in this system before citation, the action would be published. But publishing doesn't repeat. It's a one-time event, and another reason I don't like the term. So we conceptualize publishing and ask, what does being in a journal do? I call it visibility. And like citations, visibility can absolutely increase. So once your study has visibility, someone can cite it. Maybe 1 at the first turn of the cycle, maybe 100 after 100 turns. But a number is generated, and now we have the quantified ingredient necessary to put you, your study, your university, and your country, for good and bad, on display. We have impact. So what goes here and finishes the cycle? Not publishing. Again, there's no repeat, no feedback. There's something before publishing that enables the publishing and gets you the visibility and enables other KCs to cite your study that will then increase as your impact increases. I want to go back to that meeting with the research director because even though he moved on, I couldn't. It seemed he had a point. The authors were CKCs, cited KCs, and I had been wondering why some of the studies I'd worked on with other CKCs had also been rejected. So my first instinct was that there was something there to discover. You KCs probably know a similar feeling. You think you found something special, a gap in the literature, and you start a feedback loop by getting excited, and the output is hope that you found something special. And you keep seeing unjustified but positive evidence, and you get more excited. A hope feedback loop. At some point, another quite human feedback loop fires up. You think of the negative evidence and you say, calm down, it's probably not that big of a deal. The doubt feedback loop. And that happened with me. So after my preliminary excitement, I cooled down. I asked myself, how come the research director and the CKCs can't figure it out? Maybe you understand this because it's hard to tell which cycle hope or doubt is. Both can be vicious or virtuous. So coming down from my excitement, I kept translating and revising the English of more manuscripts, while at the same time I did what you KCs do. I went to the literature to see if I could find any gaps, justify the evidence that I saw. That's little L, because besides general information, the literature for publishing is not that extensive. So I went back to the highest impact and first book I read when I started working with UKCs, The Craft of Research. It's amazing. You should read it, reread it, and keep it physically or digitally nearby for reference. Then I went back to my second go-to book, the second highest impact publishing book. I have it digitally, Writing Science. Again, get it, read it, and refer to it. Both books have helped me tremendously to understand a little about what you KCs do. But reading them again, I didn't find what I was looking for. What a manuscript needs to do. Plenty of how, just not much on what to do to be scientifically effective, specifically in the manuscript. A goal that would fill in this last part of the feedback loop of sharing created knowledge. Can you hear it? I still couldn't. Funny enough, it was a non-science book that put me on the path. Well, the book also caused me to start this video journal with the challenges you face, not to mention help me in so many ways outside of sharing created knowledge and working with UKCs. The obstacle is the way shares the ancient, current, and therefore eternal wisdom that you shouldn't avoid your obstacles, your challenges, your dragons. You should go straight at them. As what you will learn from facing them head on not only helps you overcome them, but also forges you for the future challenges you will face. It's a lot like an Annie Hack manifesto and the Dragon Myth. It can be summed up by the quote I shared at the end of the first issue. The hard way is the easy way, and the easy way is the hard way. So I went to the biggest obstacles I had access to, rejections. There are never enough words, but as I reviewed them, I started seeing some concepts emerge. Requests for information, mentions of incoherence, gaps in reasoning. I stayed with them, trying to parse something, anything from them, seeing if the words created patterns that would give me any insight. And they did. They started grouping together and associating themselves under a word I'd heard before, often. And more, I realized that that concept was the start of this feedback loop. And at the moment that it all came together, all my hopes that something special, something that I could share with UKCs, that the research director would shake my hand for, fist bumps all around. Those hopes got viciously fist bumped in the face, knocked out cold, on the floor, unconscious. Because the concept and the word was relevance.
I paused the invincible for this? What a nothing burger.
My thoughts exactly. But it fits perfectly. Editors are looking for relevance, and when your study has it, they publish it, and now it's visible. And if another KC qualifies it as relevant, your study is cited, you get more impact than before, and now you are more relevant. And that amplifies your study's visibility, and the virtuous cycle repeats. A study flourishes with relevance. So yes, a nothing burger. Everybody knows this. And of course, I started the vicious cycle of negative self-talk. How could you have not seen this? All the places you looked, here in the books. My seemingly virtuous hope cycle was the vicious hope cycle. Going down the wrong rabbit hole, hoping it was the right one. So I went back through the table of contents of the craft of research and I found it, but it actually took a while, as it wasn't a chapter topic or even a sub-chapter topic. It was chapter 2, section 5.4, a sub-subtopic. And as you can see, not about the relevance of your study, but of your bibliography. Now, it's totally important, but not what makes your results relevant. I checked the index, and the only other mention was relevant regarding arguments. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but my knocked out and still on the floor hopes were actually regaining consciousness. Okay, let's check writing science. Table of contents? Nothing. In the index, I kid you not, after rejection and before research, where relevance should be, again, nothing. The relevance of your study was not indexed. Think about that irony. Because it's digital, I searched the whole book and only 2 mentions in the same sentence, not related to publishing or the manuscript. My hopes started moving around. I started asking the KCs and the CKCs I work with, and many made the connection to novelty, an absolute subconcept of relevance. And some mentioned another subconcept of relevance, the so what of a study. But when I probed further, asking how you define, find, and evaluate relevance, characterize it, and finally, how do you get your manuscript to effectively communicate it? There wasn't much of an answer. And when I pressed them, at times there was a response. If you properly define the gap and the study is novel, your study must be relevant. And not ironically, that summarized what many of the rejections were saying. We're not convinced your study fills the gap you found. And my hopes sat up. Hopes are important things. And I think they asked me, how do you communicate something that's so important, that seems so ambiguous, so unclear? Science is the study of the universe. And if you wanted to conceptualize it a little bit further, down, and super roughly, please, chemistry would be the study of matter, physics, the study of matter that moves, and biology, the study of matter that lives. Way down. If there was a root conceptualization for sharing created knowledge, what they call publishing, I would say it was the study of relevance. Now, as I mentioned, and it's probably obvious, I'm not the publishing or manuscript hack guy.
No duh, Captain Obvious.
Okay. There are videos talking about that. Watch them, try and implement them. I've seen some good information in some of them. They can help you. But given these deep and heavy challenges that you face, fierce dragons, that some of you want to be C and maybe even HCKCs, that you want a career in research, we need to get more informative definitions and conceptualizations of relevance, of metrics, reasoning, expert evaluation, and written communication specifically for publishing, specifically for sharing your created knowledge. Specific theory and conceptualizations will help you understand, super important. But to get the gold, we need to apply them. We need to engineer. We need to engineer an action plan to take advantage of the theory. I've done a bunch already, and with your help, we'll develop it further. The great thing is these conceptualizations and an action plan will not only help you accurately share your created knowledge, what I call optimizing your impact, but also reduce the frustrating pressure of being on display, and also allow you to just focus on the inspiring pressure of working at the high standards of science. So almost all of the challenges I've been mentioning, except for one, are quite subjective. That's what makes sharing created knowledge a complex endeavor, because of the qualitative nature of its challenges. Now, I'm not talking about reason as the one, as it too can sometimes be in the eye of the beholder. Crazy enough, at times, reason is subjective. The one I'm talking about brings the challenges of being on display, of not only everyone being able to see and evaluate your work, but quantify and compare your work and you as a KC. Metrics. But metrics are part of the virtuous cycle I'm sharing with you. The whole lower half, far from existing only to tyrannize you, in the next issue, we'll look to start embodying the title of this book and the wisdom of the ages, facing head-on the obstacle, the dragons of metrics. The goal is that we can flip them around, turn them from tyrants into guides. So it is so much easier to change this P word to the F word, so you can publish and flourish. So I appreciate your time and hope that this small bit of information can help you, as my methodology helps hundreds of other KCs in the navigation of the complex world of publishing and the optimization of your impact. Your help would be so valuable to me if you could cite me the YouTube way. It's an easy open access subscription, and I'll be loading up a bunch of issues in this first round, so click the bell to get notified. And please, comment below, because your feedback can help me improve this journal for KCs, just like it was KC feedback that helped me build and helps me continually improve my methodology, applied scientometrics. You tell me your challenge, I try and solve and systematize it, and then share it in my methodology, and now make a video. If you'd like to explore working with me, you can use the email below. I normally work through your university administration with department or research chairs or directors, but I also work directly with UKCs. There's another email below to receive a transcript of this issue, and here's a playlist for other issues. Ciao for now, KC Power.